I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture, I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands, people buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Hi, folks, and welcome back to another edition of Business of Story. I am Park Howell, and I'm so glad you're with us today. Now, let me take you back a little bit. I remember a time in my young career, and it really seems like a long time ago now, that I would refer business to all kinds of colleagues, expecting to get something in return. Hell, I did it more for me, I think, than I actually did it for them. And you know what? I rarely got anything in return, which pissed me off. I thought, how unfair is this? I give and I give and I give, and everyone just seems to take and take and take. What a wimp I was. Until one day I woke up. Selfish me thought it was about reciprocity, when it's not. It's simply about helping those around you get what they want. And the universe, as woo-woo as it sounds, will amply reward you in return. Virtually every significant piece of business I have ever landed has come from a referral, and often from someone I didn't know, but I had inadvertently serviced somehow. So on today's show, we have a best-selling author and sought-after speaker in the Fortune 500 world, Bob Burg. Bob co-wrote the great little book called The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea. Now, what I love about The Go-Giver is it's a fun business parable about a salesman named Joe who had to reframe his story from one of taking to a professional that goes out of his way to give of himself, his time, and his talent. And he is amply rewarded in return for his work. You see, The Go-Giver is a wonderful little tale that teaches so many lessons through the art of storytelling. The book has sold more than 500,000 copies and has been translated in 21 languages. Here's what Arianna Huffington wrote about Bob's little parable in the foreword. Quote, giving, touching others' lives, expanding the circle of our concern to include others, being authentic, and being always open to receiving as well as giving. That's not just a children's fairy tale. It's a good description of many of the most amazing people I've encountered. And while they may live and work in different countries and in different fields, they all share the same core giving philosophy. This book captures that philosophy and shows that it is more than a fable, a parable, or a pipe dream. It's real, a path that people can follow in their daily lives. I am so excited to have Bob on the show today because today you are going to learn the 5 Go-Giver rules for stratospheric success. What the single most important question is to ask yourself about everything you do, and how when you refocus your story on others, how your journey will become epic. Plus, Bob's got a freebie at the end of the show that you're not going to want to miss. So let's get going with The Go-Giver, Bob Burg. Hey, Bob, welcome to Business of Story.
Thank you, Park. Great to be with you.
Yeah, this is awesome. You know, we have been covering story from every possible angle, and today's show, since so many of our listeners are really about using story to their advantage in building their businesses, we're going to take very much of a business focus on Business of Story. And we're going to focus on your book, The Go-Giver. I loved it. You sent it out to me, got a chance to read it when I was up in Vegas last week. It's a quick read, a parable of sorts. And it has these 5 laws or 5 things of stratospheric growth, and I would love to shape the show around that today with you, Bob. So welcome, and why don't you give us a little bit of background of how did you get yourself into the Go-Giver world?
Well, I began as a broadcaster, first in radio and then in television. Years and years ago, I was the late night news guy for a very small ABC affiliate in the Midwest. probably the worst newscaster you've ever seen.
Now, wait, why? What made you so bad?
Okay, I could read the news. That was not an issue. Anyone can pretty much do that. But I was 24 years old. I really wanted to be a sportscaster. I had no idea of the news and what it entailed, and I really didn't care. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also, I think probably my mindset was probably a little bit too positive for the medium anyway. I mean, my idea of a good newscast beginning would have been to say good morning or good evening. I'm Bob Berg in the news tonight. Everything's great. Go to bed.
That doesn't sell much advertising, though.
Right. That does not sell. Here's a story that does not get much press. Corporate CEO treats people fairly. They workshop that one, Park. Did not take.
Well, now that America's getting great again, I'm sure it's going to be nothing but positive stories moving forward.
Well, we could use some positive stories, and that's where you come in, because that's what you teach us how to do. But, from there, I graduated into sales and began to really make a study of sales. And, through having a system of doing so, and I think that's really the key, is not trying to reinvent the wheel, because I knew nothing about sales. I started reading books by people like Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins. Back then, those were, the greats, and they still are, as far as I'm concerned. Zig, of course, has passed, but his work lives on. And I began to learn and I began to apply, and I was doing very well and worked my way up to sales manager of a company, and eventually just started sharing with others what was working for me. And I began speaking on the topic, and have been doing this now for quite a while. And my first book was Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales, which was about building relationships and so forth. And I'd always loved parables, though. I'd always loved reading parables, talk about the ultimate stories, right? And I think my first parable I ever read was Ogmandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World. And then there were stories such as Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon, which was really about financial planning. And you think about it, and he could have just said, pay yourself first, do this, do a few things, boom, boom, boom. But instead, he wrote a story about it that millions of people have read. And because of that book, they decided to actually take control of their own finances. And then stories such as parables such as the series by Doctors Blanchard and Johnson, the 1 Minute series, 1 Minute Manager, 1 Minute Salesperson, 1 Minute Apology, and all these parables throughout the years. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic concept from Endless Referrals, and the premise being that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, and put that into a parable. So I basically asked the question, what is the main characteristic of building those relationships? Well, you're giving. You're giving value to everyone you can. And so I came up with a name, The Go-Giver, in a very sketchy beginning, but it was really only after I asked John David Mann, who was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for, and back then few people outside a certain niche knew John, but those who did knew he was brilliant. And I asked John if he would be the lead writer and storyteller of the book, and fortunately he agreed. Since then it's just been a good run. But you talk about a magnificent storyteller. John is just amazing.
So now coming back to this idea of the go-giver, give, and the fact that you mentioned Zig Ziglar right at the top of the show, I got a chance to meet Zig and see him in action in, where was I? I think in Dallas. It was in Dallas, Texas, for a Forever Living Products convention that I was helping produce, the product launches and the business rollout, 1995. And Zig was the guy. I had not heard him in action before, and he was so nice. Got a chance to meet him and chat with him before he went on.
Wonderful.
Went on stage. Of course, he owned the room. And the one line that he said out of all of his lines, all of his wonderful little memes, is the one that sits with me the strongest. And it goes like this: you can have everything in life you want if you will just help other people get what they want. And to me, when I read The Go-Giver, essentially that felt like the theme of the entire book.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Zig was the first winner of our annual Go-Givers Lifetime Achievement Award. And when we presented that on stage, I cited that quote as being just such a landmark for me in my sales career when I heard him say this. It was actually on one of his audio cassette tape programs, right? Not even a CD. It was a cassette. And in that, magnificent Yazoo City, Mississippi Southern drawl, he said, so you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want.
You've got that down.
Yeah. Well, we had him on stage, and I got to actually do my Zig imitation right in front of Zig and Mrs. Ziegler and his son Tom, who was on stage with him. And it was the thrill of my life to have an opportunity to do that. And I went through one of his vignettes that he tells in that very first audio tape of his that I had listened to that made such a huge difference for me.
Yeah. Well, when I was sitting backstage listening to that, and I was sort of a brash, young communications pro, quote unquote, air quotes around pro, I was still learning. That line came out of him, and I kind of had to call BS. I'm thinking, oh, come on, that sounds good. Does that really work? I can't see how that works. Well, it does work. When I practiced it over my career since then. And that was what was underscored to me in your book. And one other element in your book that really kept coming back to me is this idea of touching as many people as you can. When you're looking at your business, the numbers aren't about the bottom line financial numbers. The numbers are about the number of people you can actually connect with and help through your stories, through your message, through whatever service or product it is you provide. Don't worry about the bottom line, that will take care of itself.
Well, you make a great point, and this is why John and I say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, which means nothing more than that the focus must be on the other person. The value comes first, touching lives with value. The value comes first, and the money you receive is simply a very natural and direct result of the value you provide.
Okay, so what you're talking about is really this first law of stratospheric success, the law of value. Your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment.
Yeah, and this again is where you place your focus on that other person, on helping that other person. A great example of that is you go into a Ritz-Carlton hotel, and you're greeted by the guest contact employee, which is everyone at a Ritz-Carlton hotel. And they will never say, hey, hi, or how you doing? It's always good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon the time of day. When you need them, when you ask them for something, they'll put down what they're doing and they'll help you. But at the end, when you say thank you, they'll never say no problem. They won't even say you're welcome. They'll say, my pleasure. And what a huge difference it is. You may pay a lot of money when you stay at a Ritz-Carlton, but everything about the experience itself says to you, wow, I received so much more in value than what I paid. Now, here's the interesting thing. Someone might say, well, yeah, okay, Bob, the Ritz-Carlton can practice doing all that stuff. They've got training and they're big and they're, you know what? Any other hotel, motel could do the same thing, big or small. Marriott, Hyatt, Westin, all fine properties, and they could do that. And some of them do, but not necessarily consistently. Super 8 hotels could do that. Motel 6, where Tom Bodette leaves the lights on for us, they could do it too. And so could Dave and Mary and their team of 3 people at Dave and Mary's Stop and Stay Inn. But they don't. Now, you might say, okay, well, Dave and Mary and their team of 3 people, they could say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and my pleasure till the cows come home. They're not taking market share away from Ritz-Carlton. No, of course they're not. But they will own their targeted demographic, and they will probably take market share from Motel 6 and maybe even Super 8. It's those little differences that help you provide value to others because you're focused on them. And to the degree you do that, that's the degree that other person feels, wow, I received so much more than what I paid for. Well, of course, you make a significant profit yourself.
And when did this, and it being the top of your stratospheric success laws number 1, I don't know that you necessarily found it in that order, but when was this really underscored to you and you had your aha moments? Like you're like, oh.
Believe it or not, Park, there's a story behind that.
I'm glad because
just staying with the theme. I mean, as long as I'm here, So I'd been in sales for a few years and again, had been doing pretty well, but had reached nowhere near my potential. And really it was because I still didn't have the focus in the right place. The focus was on myself. It was on the product or service. It was on the sale itself. And I remember coming back one day, and I was working for a company at the time. I was not the sales manager. I was one of the sales staff, a sales team. And I came back, and I must have had a dejected look on my face because one of the older guys there, and he was not in sales. I think he was in engineering, and I think he retired soon after that. But he, nice guy, and he said to me, "Berg, can I give you some advice?" And I said, "Sure, please do." And he said, "If you want to make a lot of money in business," actually he said, "if you want to make a lot of money in sales," he said, "don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target," he continued, "you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money. But never forget, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It's not your target itself. Your target is serving others." And
So
that made the big difference.
And that's that number one law coming in. And in The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea. You have Joe the salesman, and Joe is...
I was Joe.
What's that?
I was Joe when that, you know what I'm saying?
And
we've all been Joe or Josephine at one time or another. We all have.
And he's coming to the end of his quarter, and he's not making his numbers, and he's got a big client just kind of hanging out there, and it doesn't look good. It looks like he's not going to land the deal, and all he can think about, lose sleep over, is, oh my God, my numbers, my income, my job, my career. And then you introduce him to
Pindar, yep.
Pindar, thank you. Yeah. Who is this wise guy, wise gentleman, not a wise guy. Wise guy, eh? Not a wise guy. He's going to take care of him because he's not hitting his numbers, you see. A wise gentleman that introduces him to these 5 laws, and it just works exactly opposite to what Joe thinks it ought to, or what your reader thinks it ought to, how they should work. They should be all in for himself and in for his company and get as big a contract as he possibly can, but the story doesn't go that way. So it takes us to the first law he understands and learns, is that law of value. And then I thought it was also interesting that Pindar asks him to go and practice it every day. He's got 5 days to learn these 5 laws, and he has to put it to use. Mm-hmm. Now, is that something that you've experienced too in your own business coaching and leadership?
Oh, sure. Action is key. I mean, we all know we can have the best thoughts, the nicest ideas, the greatest of intent, but unless action's put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. And that's why the one condition, if you will, for mentorship was that Joe had to take what he learned that day, not ask if it would work or why it might not work, but he just had to do it. Just had to take action on it. Yeah. And that's so very key. We want people to be people of action. We want people to be go-getters as well as go-givers, right? We want people to be go-getters, people of action, and go-givers, people who understand that when you shift your focus from yourself onto others, not only is that a pleasant way to do business, it's a very financially profitable way as well. But we want them to be go-getters and go-givers. What we don't want is for people to be go-takers. And those are the people who feel almost entitled, if you will, to take without having added value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And that's what Joe was at the beginning. He was a nice guy. He was a well-intended guy, but he was very much a go-taker. It was all about Joe.
All right. Law number 2, the law of compensation. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. And this is that one that really connected with me.
Right.
So how did you come across this law?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's simply understanding that while it's great. In fact, the CEO in the story, Nicole, told Joe that law number 1, the law of value, as important as it is, that represents only your potential income. But no matter how great a value you give to others and how wonderful a buying experience, if you only touch the lives of one person, you're certainly not going to make a very big income. So law number 2 is actually that represents your actual income. And that's how many lives do you impact through your fantastic products, services, or what have you. And that's the key. So it's understanding that when you that when you touch these lives, you create the environment for you to be able to touch a lot of lives and be able to serve a lot more people with the exceptional value you provide. You're certainly going to make a lot more money. And that's, again, it's a relation to how many people you serve.
Do you have an example where you've seen that with one of your mentors or mentees, where you've got them to stop thinking about the money and start thinking about the lives touched and the impact it had on their business?
Well, there's many examples, because you see it all the time. And there was one of my favorites was somebody from the Pittsburgh area who, during the economic downturn, and he was a roofer, and during the economic downturn, business was really suffering, and he was doing what most people did, and that is pulling back, trying to give the least amount of value for what he was charging. And he read the book, and he got it. He really got it. And he said, no. He said, what I need to do, if I'm going to separate myself, or as my friend Scott McCain would say, distinguish myself from my competitors, he said, I've got to add more value. I've got to bring more value to the table. I've got to make this experience so fantastic that this person just feels great about it and wants to tell all his or her friends about me. And that's what he did. And his business actually shot up during the recession that we had.
Wow, that's cool. Number 3. Well, actually, before we go to number 3, the last question I was going to ask about this, with social media and our ability to reach out and literally touch so many people, but to me, it's still kind of a distance touch. I mean, they can come, like, for instance, they can come to Business of Story and download tools and work, and they listen to the podcast, which I'm so happy about, that it feels like there are huge numbers that we can touch and impact.
Mm-hmm.
But until you actually get in front of those people, and be it a workshop, a speaking gig, working one-on-one with companies to get them there, it's hard to truly have that impact. So have you seen that, where some of these numbers might be sort of fictitious, and that we're reaching all of these people? Well, are you really reaching them online? Does it, what's the difference of being online or being in person to really make it work, making this law work?
Well, while I don't think there's anything quite the same as being belly to belly, the fact is we can't always be, but we can still create fantastic relationships online. Social media gives us the opportunity, provides the opportunity for us to reach out and connect with more people than we otherwise most likely ever would have been able to. But we still have to understand that, people don't do business with and refer business to computers or social media platforms. They refer them to those people they know, like, and trust. So what we need to do is, in whatever way we can, we need to connect with the people who whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or on through your blog community. And I believe one of the best reasons for having a blog is to create a community. And, fortunately, there are opportunities to be able to connect with these people. And I think, like anything else, whenever you're about to tweet or post or whatever, you always ask the question, how does what I'm about to do serve this other person? How does it add value to their lives, to their business? And when we keep that in mind, sure, it's not the exact same as being in front of someone, but, Park, I do believe that the trade-off really, and it doesn't have to be a trade-off. But what I'm making the point, I guess, is that, yeah, there's a whole lot of people out there, and no, we're not able to connect at a personal level with all of them, but we can connect to the point that we don't have to connect with every single one of them for it to really make sense.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of a universal question that comes up that I think is really a foundational question in all of this. I had a documentarian on a few weeks ago, Peter Bick, and he talks about when he is presenting to an audience, the way he gets over stage fright is he stops turning it on himself and he thinks about the audience. He said, how am I going to serve them today or serve them tonight? And then he said, all of a sudden, that world of stress is lifted off the shoulders. And so here you are repeating the exact same thing. No matter what we do, we first ask the question, how is what I'm about to do actually going to serve my audience?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Law number 3, the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first.
Again, counterintuitive when you first hear it, and that's how Joe felt. Counterproductive sounding, maybe even downright Pollyanna-ish when you first hear it. But then you think about it, right? The greatest leaders, the top influencers, the most successful salespeople, this is simply how they run their lives and conduct their businesses. They're always looking for ways to bring value to others, make other people's lives better. Now, I do want to qualify this, if I may, because I think it's easy to misunderstand this, and yet it's very, very important. When we say place the other person's interests first, we certainly don't mean you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's simply that, as Joe, the protege, learned from several of the mentors in the story, and as you and I have discussed already, the golden rule of business is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's simply no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward us from others than by genuinely and authentically moving from what we call an I focus or me focus to an other focus.
Yeah. It's really, really well said. I was just sitting here thinking as you were talking through that, so many of us are trying to develop our influence. They create our brand persona, especially online, that so many folks are solopreneurs and working from home, and they are gurus or experts in one area or another. And there's this big movement afoot of building one's influence online. And I'm wondering if that often gets confused with sort of the ego of my influence. Let me make sure that I'm in all of the right places, saying all the right things, all the right time, and I'm guilty of that too, as opposed to saying, how am I serving you today with what I'm doing?
Well, I think the big thing about that is understanding that other people really aren't thinking of us nearly as much as we're thinking of us.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah, we get so caught up in our world that, like, man, this is like the best blog post I've ever written. And people are like, yeah, whatever.
Right. And then you say something about your cat and you get like 1,000, people. Yeah.
So it comes down to that influence. Well, I love it. Well, I tell you what, Bob, we're going to take a break for a story or two here. But when we come back, I want to have you, and we'll cover the final two laws, the law of authenticity and the law of receptivity. So we are giving, but it's okay to receive as well. So let's cover those two laws right after this. Michelle and I recently spent time with our son Parker in Hollywood. We had stayed at the Hollywood Hotel before, but when we looked into the price, room rates had risen to like $270 a night, and that's for a quote-unquote historical hotel, which seemed a bit of a stretch for us, even given the added value entertainment of the occasional haunting. So what we did is we Airbnb'd it instead. We found a quaint one-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a home in Hollywood Hills, just 5 minutes from our son's apartment, and it was nearly half the price. Our own little place above Tinseltown. Well, using Airbnb as base camp, we stayed in a Notting Hill flat in London, an 11th century manor house on a 200-hectare working farm in Normandy, and a troglodyte carved out of the granite hills of the Loire Valley in France. Now, if you don't know what a troglodyte is, just think of a cave converted into a condo. So with Airbnb, you are definitely the hero of this brand journey. They get it. Instead of telling the company story, Airbnb makes it easy to capture and share your travel tales. Just check out their section called Stories from the Airbnb Community on their website. Now, if you want to learn about the people and explore the places before you get there, visit the site's Belong Anywhere section. It features photos and short films of the people and the places so you get a sense of what you're going to experience. Starring the customers in its stories is so important to Airbnb that they even let you mess with their logo so you can create your own version of it. I can only imagine 1,000 long-deceased brand managers rolling over in their graves at the thought. And some of them might be staying at the Hollywood Hotel, come to think of it. But in today's engagement economy, story marketing is where it's at. And that means handing over your brand story to the real storytellers, your customers. So for developing an international community of engaging hosts that allow you to literally belong anywhere, and then providing the encouragement and the venue to tell your travel tales, Airbnb earns my Story Marketer of the Week award. can't thank you enough for listening to my Business of Story podcast. Your notes, tweets, and emails telling me how this program and our amazing guests have helped you live into a more powerful story make it all worthwhile. And yet, coming to you in audio only is the most one-dimensional way I can imagine to reignite within you the one true superpower we all possess, storytelling. So, picture me with you live. That's right, I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story marketing, and I'm ready to do this for you and your people. You can book me for keynotes and workshops, brand story strategy consulting, and live webinars. You can also join me for free every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on Facebook Live. During my weekly show, I review the smart story marketers who are making an impact every day with their business storytelling. I take you through an element of the story cycle system that you can immediately apply to your brand story. And I offer up a free tool, tip, or technique that will help you clarify your brand story and rise above the noise of the attention economy. Just follow me on Facebook or join our private group called the Business of Story Raconteurs. We'd love to have you be a part of our story marketing family. So let me help you get your story on by visiting my speaker page at businessofstory.com and start crafting and telling compelling stories that sell. Welcome back to Business of Story and our guest today, Bob Burg. Bob, it's just been so much fun having you on here. Now, you wrote The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea. Adam Grant from the New York Times, best-selling author of Give and Take, says The Go-Giver is the most important parable about business and life of our time. I mean, that's pretty high praise. How did you come up with this particular parable to share these 5 laws of stratospheric success?
It was really just, these are laws that John David Mann, my co-author, and I have both experienced, grew up with. I was very blessed to have great parents who, to me, they demonstrated what a go-giver is just by how they lived and still do. And John, it turns out, also had wonderful parents that set a great example. John and I are both entrepreneurs, so we both had business experiences that we brought to the table. Have met many people, interviewed many people and what we found is that these 5 laws, they didn't have to be by these particular names of the laws, but people who were successful, sustainably successful, consistently successful, this is simply how they operated.
Yeah. So we've covered the law of value, the law of compensation, the law of influence. Now let's talk about the law of authenticity. The most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself.
Yeah, in the story, Deborah Davenport, one of the mentors, shared a lesson she learned early in her career, and that is that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are indeed all very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. Now, when you do show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you. They feel comfortable with you. They know, like, and trust you. They feel safe with you. They want to be in relationship with you, do business with you, refer you to others. So showing up authentically is not only good life, it's actually good business, which brings up the question, why then do some people not show up authentically, but show up rather as I guess the correct Latin term would be fonus balonus. And, and we might think, well, because
sort of physics major? Or
yes, really. Yeah. Those are my 2 Latin words I know, fonus and balonus. Yeah. But I think the reason why people do show up inauthentically sometimes is not because they have bad intent. I mean, there are always those people out there. It's a big world. But I think with most people, it's simply they don't have the self-confidence to really show up authentically. They don't understand their true worth, the true value they bring to the table. So, and as human beings, sometimes it's difficult for us to see the good stuff in ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So, which is why it can be important to have a coach or a mentor, formally or informally, just, someone who cares about you, but is removed enough that they can unemotionally be able to not only see, but help you see the great character traits and talents that you possess. Authenticity is a really very important thing to possess, because if you don't have it, you know what? It comes through eventually.
Yeah. There's been kind of a theme all month that keeps popping up around authenticity. We had Sally Hogshead on earlier in the month. You know Sally?
Oh,
Yeah.
she is one of my heroes. I just love Sally.
I got to tell you what, that lady can belt out a Tarzan yell like nobody's business. Carol Burnett would shudder in her presence. She did that on my show. It was awesome. But, we talked about her fascination advantage assessment.
Mm-hmm.
It's an assessment you can take, and she gave us a little special secret code in that show. If you want to go and have someone, if you want to take the fascination assessment, absolutely free. Go listen to the Sally Hogshead show, and the secret code is in there. But what I love about the fascination advantage assessment is none of us feel like we're very fascinating by ourselves, so we have to kind of put on airs or make up things about ourselves in what we believe makes us stand out. But what she has demonstrated in her work is that people are fascinating just by themselves. And so you take this assessment, and it shows you how the world sees you, not how you see the world. And I took it, and I was sort of bashful about some of the findings. I'm like, well, that's not really me. No, that's not really me. I don't know. And I sent it to my wife, and I said, does this ring true? Is this how the world sees me? And she writes back, duh. And that's why I love you, by the way. But it goes back to what Sally says, exactly what you were talking about, is just be yourself. Be your authentic self, and have courage in showing your authentic, vulnerable self in all you do. And that's what gets people to like you and to trust you and to really get to know you. And that's what you want them to do, right? To get them to buy into what you are about, so that you can help them get what they want.
Sure. And, it's a big part of influence. I know we're talking about authenticity right now, but when you are authentic and that helps you become the influencer you can be, people buy into you first before they buy into your ideas. Mm-hmm. And that's why the know, like, and trust is so very important. And the more people who you develop that kind of relationship with, the more people who become what we call your personal walking ambassadors, allows you to touch the lives of more people, law number 2, with the exceptional value you provide, law number 1. So they all sort of work together very holistically.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Now, law number 5, the law of receptivity. The key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And I'm really glad, Bob, you put in law number 5, because when I read through the first 4 laws, I'm thinking, I'm just giving and giving and giving. I got to feed my family. How does this work?
Well, you bring up a great point, because that's exactly what it's saying. Law number 5 is really saying that you both breathe out and breathe in. It's not one or the other. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. And despite the many, many messages of lack we receive from the world around us, giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. Now, the focus is on the giving, right? The focus is on giving of value. But the giving is what begins the receiving process. You simply need to allow yourself to receive with gratitude.
Okay, now let me challenge that a little bit, because in my mind, I'm still like perplexed. So you're giving, and I'm doing lots of free seminars and this just to get.
Well, that's not necessarily what giving means, though. Okay. And I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. Go finish that thought, please.
Rude guest.
No.
No, giving doesn't mean you're giving yourself away, and it doesn't mean you're doing things for free. Giving simply means you're focusing on providing value for that other person. Now, that may be that you're giving something like Sally's wonderful assessment, or when you do your podcast, it's and because people are going to get to know you and like you and trust that's fine, and those are all wonderful strategies and tactics. Though it's not necessarily being a go-giver or not a go-giver. It's just they're just great strategies to use in any kind of business. No, when we talk about giving, we're simply understanding that it's that shift in focus. Your focus is on giving value. But because you're giving value doesn't mean you're not charging for it. Ernesto Iafrate in the book, the restaurateur who had the very upscale restaurant, he was giving immense value for what he was charging. but he was charging a lot of money. But he was giving so much value, people felt wonderful about it. People often ask, and this is where, if you see the title of the Go Giver, you might think, oh man, just giving yourself away. No, Go Givers tend to make more money and be much more profitable than most people because Go Givers are not selling on price. In fact, unless your last name is Walmart, selling on low price is probably not a good, productive, fun, profitable way to do business. When you sell on low price, you're a commodity. When you sell on high value, you're a resource. And in the selling the Go Giver way, you're focusing on giving immense value to people. And you're also receiving a very excellent profit for what you're doing.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm glad you clarified that because then I sit there and I'm thinking, sending a proposal over and gee, am I asking too much for this or am I not asking enough? And where do I cross the line from being a go giver to a go taker, or does that even come into effect? But what you're saying is value is really measured in the experience.
It is. And where price is a dollar amount, and this is the big difference between price and value. Price is a dollar amount, right? It's finite. It simply is what it is. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth or so much value to another person? And remember, value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what we believe is of value or why it should be. It's what they believe is of value. So when they feel so great about it, when they're receiving much more in use value than what they're paying, okay, that's when you're charging a wonderful price and you're making a great profit from it. As a matter of fact, the main characteristic of a free market-based exchange, free market simply meaning no one is forced to do business with one another. The main characteristic of a free market exchange is there are always two profits, the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each one comes away from the transaction better off than they were before the transaction.
It's got to be good for both parties. I'm just writing
Absolutely.
Vigorously here. That's something my father always taught us too. He said, the only deal is a deal that's good for both parties.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this is really fascinating stuff. So you've written this book, and in your own way, you are the go-giver in creating, taking the time with you and John David Mann to write this book and push it out. When did you produce it, publish it, and how many have you sold? I know it's been translated into like 21 different languages.
Yeah, we wrote it in 2006. It got turned down over the course of a year by about 27 publishing houses. We finally found the right one, Portfolio, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, and they are absolutely the most magnificent publishing partner you could have. They are just fantastic. And let's see, it came out on December 27th, 2007, but it hit the bookstores in 2008. So it's been about 9 years, and it's sold now. We say 500,000, but that's because it hasn't hit the next big mark. It's now sold over 650,000. So once it hits 750,000, we'll do a new printing of the book, right? Over 750,000, sold, and then then see where it goes from there.
And the parable is a fun read, and literally you can get through this book in an hour or two. Or hour, 3 if you really want to take some time. And I've gone through it twice now. I love it. It's a fictional account, but it's all taken from actual experiences that you and your co-author have gone through. Is that right?
Just about all of them. I mean, there are a couple of things like the thing at the end, and we won't give away the plot, the ending, but that didn't happen. But many of the incidents that are talked about in the story, yes, actually did happen. We just put them into the story as part of it.
Now, you've written this parable. You have share it with the world. Tell me, what is the one thing that you've gotten away from this that surprised you?
I think that what maybe surprised us at the beginning was that I guess is the term, early adopters, right? They were the ones who were already very successful. The first wave of people that we heard from and that were buying massive amounts of the book to spread throughout their organizations and their companies, had already been doing these things long before they ever heard of the book. And we were getting all sorts of emails and calls from it. This is what I've been telling my people they're supposed to do, and they don't listen. And this is how I've built my, right. And then 6 months later, 9 months later, we're getting emails from the people who received the books from those people. So we should have, in retrospect, probably should have expected that to be the way it was, but that took us by surprise.
Mm-hmm. Now, for you personally, so the universe has a way of answering folks. So you are a big promoter of the go-giver concept. You take the time to write this parable and you put it out there. What have you personally experienced because of this?
Oh, the responses that we receive from people, and you talk about, allowing yourself to receive. Wow. I just can't tell you the feeling of someone saying that it made such a difference for them, that they connected with the characters and the story, and that they, their income went through the roof, and that now they're loving what they're doing. They're focusing on serving like they never have before, and realizing, all the things that you just want people to take away from the book when you receive that. And I'm not saying that to brag in any way. It was just a matter of answering the question. Mm-hmm. That is the greatest feeling you can have when you hear that from your readers.
Yeah. No, I can totally appreciate that, because when I get notes from my listeners and they will tell me a particular guest or some point that we made had a real impact for them, and it led them down a road to read some other things or do some other things, is you're right. There's no amount of money that can replace that feeling of just gratitude to be able to have had that kind of impact on people.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've really got to credit John David Mann as the lead writer and storyteller. Again, to be able to work with a person who's not only as brilliant as he is, which he is, but just as humble as can be,
Yeah.
And just a joy to work with. And so I really thank him because when we talk about story, and he's really a great storyteller.
Well, Bob, thank you for being here. Where can people learn more about you, the work you do, and where, of course, can they buy your book? I suppose Amazon, but where would you like us to send them?
Yeah, best place is probably thegogiver.com, without the hyphen in this case, thegogiver.com. And while they're there, they can get chapter 1 of the book or an excerpt from the book if they like, and then see if they enjoy where it's heading, and then they can click through to Amazon or another online seller. And they can join the Go-Giver movement, check out the podcast, and all the goodies and so forth. So we invite them to thegogiver.com.
The Go-Giver. Well, Bob, thank you so much for this. Really, really fascinating conversation. And for me, one of the great things about doing a podcast is getting to meet people like you. My network grows exponentially, but to be able to read your book and then sit down and speak with the author this way is really great. It's very gratifying, and I appreciate your time and being the Go-Giver on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate all the work you're doing. Keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you, Bob. Now, in the spirit of being a Go-Giver, I've been doing this all month long, and I would like to just remind our listeners that if you want to get your brand story straight and you want to do it live right here on the Business of Story podcast, send me a note to park@businessofstory.com. Let me know what your biggest brand story challenge or problem is. What is the hurdle that you want to overcome in this process? I'm going to select up to 3 folks. I'm going to send you my workbook for free, have you fill it out, send it back to me so I can get my head around what you're doing and what your challenge is and how you're approaching it. And then I'm going to invite you on the show, and we are going to work your brand story strategy live for the world to hear. So not only will you benefit and end up after the show's over with a real, very clear brand story, but our listeners will have a chance to listen through the process and even apply this to their own brand stories. So if you'd like to participate, shoot me a note. Let me know what your biggest brand story challenge is to park@businessofstory.com. And following the next few months, we will be rolling these shows out, and hopefully you'll be a part of that. So looking forward to it. Bob, your book inspired me after reading it to do that. Let's go give some folks a chance to do it, and I think it'll be fun listening as well. And to that point, I appreciate you being here on this edition of Business of Story. Please visit me over at businessofstory.com for storytelling tools and other insights and techniques you can use to truly live into your most powerful stories and become the go-giver that is going to grow your business. And then join me again next week when we will have another amazing story artist like Bob who will help you craft and tell compelling brand stories that sell. Until then, have a wonderful life.